that sincere questioning and is a very, very good thing. So Phil, we do need to question,
yes.
and we hope that our audience allows that inside of themselves as well. Allow yourself the ability to question, and don't worry about whether you feel like you were wrong or right or any of those kind of things. If we just share the questions, often lots of people, not only in the audience but also in the world, benefit from the questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay then, so can we just then contrast, what is this idea of true spirituality versus pseudo-spirituality?
All right, well, I would say true spirituality is the kind of spirituality that changes our heart and causes us to become more loving, more truthful, and more humble in all of our interactions in our day-to-day life. And in addition to that, causes us to be able to connect with God and receive love from God in such a way that it transforms the soul, but not only transforms the soul just in one moment in time, but also transforms the soul continuously for the rest of our existence. So in other words, it has this infinite character or nature to it. True spirituality allows us to continually change, continually evolve into a better being. Yep. In terms of, and if I define better as a person who's more loving, more truthful, more humble, easier to get along with, more joyous, more happier with their day-to-day life, happier in their relationships. That's true spirituality. And any form of investigation that enables that, I feel, is a part of true spirituality. Let's contrast that with pseudo-spirituality. Yeah. Pseudo-spirituality is the spirituality you have when you don't have real spirituality.
What is that?
What do we call it in Australia? Clayton spirituality. It's the kind of spirituality that causes us to eventually put on a facade, that our heart really isn't changed, that we don't become more loving in our day-to-day life, we just become more selective in our day-to-day life. We don't become more truthful, we just avoid untruthful situations, and we don't become more humble. We don't look at ourselves very much, we look at everything else and what's wrong with the rest of society. In addition to that, it stops us from having a relationship with people or certain types of people. It causes barriers. It also stops us and prevents us from having a long-term growing relationship with God. And as a result of that, it causes us to go into stagnation. So when a person is involved in pseudo-spirituality, eventually they get to the point where it no longer feels that it satisfies them. So many in the audience may have noticed that with their investigation of spiritual matters, they've progressed to a certain point in a certain path and they've investigated it fully and sometimes got fully involved in the entire thing and investigated fully, and then you got to a point where you can feel, no, there's a lot wrong now. There's a lot wrong with where I'm going on this path now. And then you finish up stopping and then deciding, I've got to look for something else now. So you turn your head and you look for something else instead. And that's a sign that original thing that you were looking at was a part of the pseudo-spiritual movement, if you like.
And I feel, we're saying that this pseudo-spiritual movement is so rife on the planet, aren't we? And I feel that's because often it is quite scary for us to really look inside our heart. And so the facade, I know for myself, becomes very attractive. If I could just think my way through this whole thing and be a better person, I wouldn't have to face how I am now. Yeah. So I can see why that happens. But then as you're describing this, when we go down a path and we get basically to the end of it, we think, I can't relate to this anymore. And we try another one and another one. And eventually it gets tired. There's so much grief involved because you put your whole heart into it. I feel like then you get, there's pseudo-spirituality and then there's a lot of cynicism about spirituality, isn't there?
Yes, because what happens when we involve ourselves in the investigation of a pseudo-spiritual path, we get to, we might have done it for 10 years or 15 years. So many of us have done it for our whole lives to a certain point. And so, if you've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years and then all of a sudden it dawns upon you that there's whole areas that are wrong with it, then there's a tendency to become very cynical about all forms of spirituality. And we see that occurring, both you and I have seen that many times where people have come along to the sessions with so much cynicism because they've just spent their entire life looking at different areas of spirituality and then they've realised that there's always something wrong in the end.
Yes.
And so in the end they start going, well, there's no point to examine or to look.
Yes, yeah.
You'd like to ask?